Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing a GeForce RTX 4060 with an i5-12600KF, overclocked to 5.1 GHz and 32 GB of DDR5, so a mid-range-ish PC, in Anno 117 Pax Romana. This one is the MSI Ventus 2X version of the card. I'm running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, of course, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here, as usual, in Tech Power-Ups GPU-Z, and we already went over the other specs. So let's get right into it, shall we? Okay, first up, let's go over the settings. I'm starting at 1080p resolution, utilizing the high settings preset with upscaling turned off, TAA over here as the anti-aliasing, and ray tracing is set to low because this is the preset. Now let's run the built-in benchmark first. As you can see, it's getting pretty low FPS, 40-ish frames per second, 30s, and that insane stuttering that we saw in the 9800X 3D PC with the RTX 5090 that a lot of people have told me, it must be your CPU. The AMD X3D CPUs perform very poorly in this type of game. You need a CPU that doesn't have the 3D V cache. Well, yeah. I mean, it's just the benchmark that it's broken, basically. Alright, this isn't really a very high-end CPU either, 12600KF, but this game doesn't require a ton of cores and threads. You can see that it's only utilizing this one at around 20% usage, and the 9800X3D also had really low CPU utilization in this one. I'm not sure if it will still have these stuttering issues with a higher-end CPU from Intel, like a 14900K or Ultra 9 CPU, but it seems like it's just the benchmark itself that suffers from a heck of a lot of stuttering for some reason. I have tried medium settings without ray tracing as well before starting the video, and it still had these stuttering issues here in this system. And on low settings, on the other system, it also had these stuttering issues. So yeah, it's not CPU related or CPU brand related, you could say. It's not my other system that's broken and completely unoptimized like a couple of comments said. Like, come on, I mean, these two PCs are just meant for benchmarking. The only thing that's running aside from the games is the on-screen display, and they're optimized, alright? Anyway, I'm gonna let it run here until the benchmark is over, but you can see already that high settings probably a bit too much for the RTX 4060 and 12600KF system. We will need to drop it down a little, but I will also show you a bit of gameplay aside from the benchmark run. So once this is over, we'll take a look at that. And the results are in, as you can see. For some reason, it says that the i5 has 8 cores. That's wrong. I don't know. But you can see that everything went pretty well aside from that stuttering, which apparently doesn't really affect the 1% or 5% lows. These are the 5% lows here for the FPS. So this means that 95% of the time we're going to get 40 or more frames per second, and 5% of the time we're going to get 81 or more frames per second, and the averages were 57.4 FPS, which is actually not too bad. For a game like this, as long as you don't really drop from 30 frames per second, I think it's fine. You know, it's just clicking things and so on. You don't need to be very accurate at all. So yeah, it works pretty well. But let's hit continue here. And this is my own game that I'm playing. It's very early on, I know, but at least I'm learning, okay? I'm starting to play the game, and it's quite enjoyable from what I've seen. And over here, I actually saw that it drops a bit further than what we saw, hello there, on the built-in benchmark of the game, especially if you zoom into forest areas. As you can see, it starts dropping into the 30s, and I feel like if you see a bigger forest area, it might actually drop from 30 frames per second. So it's a little bit unpleasant of an experience if it does drop down from 30, 28 FPS, 1% lows, by the way. It's still playable, again, just due to the nature of the gameplay in this game. It doesn't really matter too much what kind of FPS you're getting, as long as you're not looking at a slideshow, that is. So I feel like this is decent, but let's try to make it better. But first of all, let's try it without ray tracing altogether. So the ray tracing is turned off, I applied it and restarted the game, and let's hit continue right here. And here we have it. We're back here. Things look a little bit more bland, I would say, but it doesn't really make that huge of a difference to the overall look of the game. And instead of dropping to like the low 30s, especially right here, we're still dropping into the low 30s. We basically gain 10% performance, if that, maybe not even that. So it's just like with the RTX 5090 PC, guys. When I disabled ray tracing there, I saw a little bit of an improvement, like from 45 to 55 frames per second, but it's not a huge improvement, unfortunately, and that's what sucks about this game's optimization. If it was getting low FPS, down into the 30s, you know, with ray tracing enabled, or in the case of that higher-end PC, like down into the 40s with ray tracing enabled at 4K max settings, native resolution, it would be okay because you just need to disable ray tracing theoretically and then it will be fine. But apparently you disable ray tracing and it's the same. And I'm even going to run the entire built-in benchmark again just to see that difference in 1% lows and averages compared to ray tracing enabled and still keeping the high settings everywhere else. So let's do that. Also, if you were wondering if it was ray tracing causing the stuttering issues, no, it wasn't. It's still going to be exactly the same, as you can see right now. So let's just let it run. I'm going to fast forward the built-in benchmark, actually, so you can see all of the scenes, and I'm going to answer some comments on the phone, on the YouTube. So yeah, after that, we'll compare the results that we got with and without ray tracing. And the results are in. We got 1% less GPU bound, by the way, but everything else is very similar. The FPS went up by 2 compared to ray tracing off. Yeah, turning off ray tracing in this game doesn't seem to do much in terms of FPS, and 5% lows as well. We got 2 FPS more there, so 5% higher. Yeah, it's meh. So to actually achieve a noticeable difference, we need to drop it down to medium settings or utilize a bit of DLSS as well. So let's try DLSS first before we mess around with the graphics quality settings. And there we go. Let's use Nvidia DLSS, set to quality. Max quality is just quality, so it's going to render the game at 720p resolution and upscale it to 1080p. And instead of getting like 32 FPS, we're getting 39 FPS in this scene, which is not a big difference whatsoever for the resolution drop, you know. Thankfully, though, the DLSS 4 that this game is utilizing looks very good. It's a little bit softer than it was at native resolution with TAA, but honestly, it might look better because it isn't as shimmery as TAA. Going over here. Okay, look at that. Lots of food and everything. That's amazing. I'm not doing anything, though. I'm just seeing things here. But yeah, it's going to be a playable experience like this. The extra 8 FPS or so that we're getting from the DLSS quality also helps it a lot. It doesn't drop into the low 30s anymore. And okay, it still drops down into the 30s, but it's only high 30s apparently. So not a problem, in my opinion. This is playable. But it could be smoother, of course. And that's why we're going to lower it down to the medium settings preset, which is probably a bit more adequate for an RTX 4060 in this game. Even though I kind of really wanted it to be able to do 1080p high settings at 60 FPS. Okay, let's try it first with DLAA at medium settings. No TAA anymore. I'm going to keep the ray tracing on because it only affects things by 2 FPS and it makes things look a little bit better. Yeah, and I will quit the game, restart it completely to make sure that everything fully applies. Alrighty, here we have it, guys. Where are the people? Ooh, the draw distance. The draw distance is terrible on medium settings. Look at this. We could see all of the people from this far away previously, and now we only see that guy over there for some reason. Yet there are still a lot of them here. Okay, so maybe I would stick to high settings, especially because medium settings is still dropping a little bit from 60 FPS into the 40s even. Damn! The visuals do look quite a bit worse right now on medium settings. I thought it was going to look very similar, but I didn't notice the pop-in previously when I was messing around with the settings. Oh, there's Roach over there! What the heck? Beautiful! But hey, if you want a little bit more stability in your game, definitely do use the medium settings, going to be a bit better. We still get 100% GPU utilization at all times here, but this isn't really a CPU intensive area, of course, because the city is quite small at this point. So let's take a look at the built-in benchmark now. So I'm really curious to see if that GPU usage drops down sometimes. Ooh, 79%, but that's just because of the stutters, so we can't really count those. But we might become a little bit CPU bound in a bit, because with the 9800X 3D, we found that even on the lowest settings possible, that was only capable of achieving around 80 to 90 FPS on average, under 100% CPU bottlenecked scenarios, okay? So I would think that the 12600KF at 5.1 gigahertz, even if it is overclocked, would probably not reach as high of a frame rate as the 9800X 3D did, of course. But for now, it seems like the GPU utilization only moves slightly whenever it is stuttering. So again, I don't think we can count those as CPU bound. So let's just let it run now and check the results later. There we go, so we finally see a big improvement in terms of FPS numbers, average 74 frames per second compared to previously 57 or 59, with or without ray tracing that is. The 5% lows are at 55, so that's quite good as well, although we have seen it drop quite a bit previously in the actual gameplay with the trees and vegetation, and GPU bound was 99% all of the time, so still no CPU bottleneck. Interesting. Now let's position this right here again. We're getting 46 frames per second, and since DLSS quality looks so similar to native resolution here, why not utilize it, right? Let's use max quality there, which is again 67% resolution scale, and it bumps it from 46 to 58 frames per second. That is quite a lot smoother, guys. So on a 60 Hz display especially, or if you have it capped to like 60 frames per second, now it won't fluctuate by all that much. It still drops down into the mid-50s sometimes, but it's going to be a much more stable and much more smooth experience like this. If you're looking for that smoother experience, of course, go ahead and use these settings. I think they're adequate here for the 4060, but again, I think I would stick to the high settings just because the draw distance of things, especially NPCs, is so much better on high. But yeah, it's much smoother this way. It's definitely playable like this, at least here, okay, in this very small city. I'm not sure how it will go in huge cities. There have been people complaining about the performance on Steam as well, so there's that. Now, lastly in this video, I want to check out the CPU performance, so I'm setting it down to low settings using ultra performance DLSS, and we're gonna drop it down to 1024 by 768. This is so we can create a CPU bound scenario 100% of the time, or at least close to 100% of the time, I hope. Alright, so here we are, 1024 by 768 using the low settings with ultra performance DLSS. This is rendering the game at 33% of 768p resolution, and in my higher end PC I saw that both the lowest settings and the highest settings we're performing pretty much the same when it comes to CPU performance. So there aren't really many options, if any at all, in the graphics options that affect the CPU performance. So the CPU will be able to achieve the same frame rates here under no GPU bottlenecks as it does with the highest settings. Just keep that in mind. All right, so over here, in this little town that we've got going on, since it's not CPU intensive at all, because there's nothing there almost, we're getting 180s, 150s, and 99% GPU usage. So we're still fully GPU bound here. That's not what we want to see, so let's exit to the menu and run the built-in benchmark. I think that one is going to be CPU bound. And indeed, that is the case. We see a full-on CPU bottleneck in the built-in benchmark because we got a much bigger city going on, still stuttering. That's not going anywhere, unfortunately. But it seems like the 12600KF is good for around 90 to 100 frames per second here. That's surprisingly close to what the 9800X3D got with the same settings, I believe. I'm fairly certain it got around these FPS. So, pretty interesting results. The 12600KF is doing a fantastic job here. Like, after I saw some people complaining on Steam about their 13700K CPUs getting 30 FPS or less, I was thinking, yeah, surely the 12600KF is going to struggle a lot. And it's just going to be unplayable on this thing, especially in the built-in benchmark. But yeah, what I'm seeing here is that this CPU is actually quite capable of playing this game. Stuttering aside, which I am not sure is only due to the benchmark. If you have a big city inside of your game and you're actually playing the game with a huge city, let me know your specs if you are CPU bound and if you are having a ton of stuttering, just like this built-in benchmark, because I'm likely not gonna get to a point where I have a huge city to test in my own gameplay scenario, because Call of Duty Black Ops 7 is coming out tomorrow, and then Tarkov is also coming out on Steam, and I want to cover those two games, so yeah. Anyway, guys, let's let it run until the end of the benchmark once again, and check out the results later, and do a little bit of a conclusion. It actually is GPU bound here, guys. In this scenario, it is GPU bound. Very interesting. I mean, it kind of makes sense. We saw it being GPU bound in our own gameplay session, so yeah, this has less things going on and more vegetation as well at the distance. So we get pretty much the same FPS as we were seeing before. Also, I'd really like to have seen frame generation implemented in this game. I think that would go a long way to make things a lot smoother between a wide variety of CPUs and GPUs, you know, because it's the perfect game for frame generation, in my opinion. You don't require quick reactions, so the input lag doesn't really matter too much, and there isn't really many artifacting that's going to be noticeable either, because you're not moving things around very fast. So I don't know why they didn't implement frame gen into this one. That would go a long way to make it more enjoyable and smoother experience in a lot of systems. Anyway, that's the end of the built-in benchmark here on the lowest settings and 1024x768 with ultra performance DLSS, and we got 185 FPS average, 23% GPU bound, by the way, so there were some scenarios, as we saw, where the GPU was maxing out, and we got 5% lows of 89, so not a bad experience whatsoever coming from that i5. It's definitely surpassing my expectations by quite a bit. And with all of that said and done, I think that's been it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your experiences down in the comments below. It will be different for everybody. Everyone has different cities going on, and again, that built-in benchmark is super inconsistent. However, the overall results that we get at the end of it don't account for the stuttering, so I don't know, man. But yeah, do let me know, and I'm gonna get out of here. Thanks very much for watching. Love you all. Bye-bye.